Hi, my name is Maya. I'm a college counselor, which means I work with high school students to help them apply to college. And I am also a Marvel fan. So when I went to see Spider-Man No Way Home, obviously one of the biggest things that stood out to me when I was first watching it was how much of the plot revolves around Peter and his friends trying to get into MIT. And as I was watching it, I was like, oh my God, there's so many things here that are wrong. So I decided to make this video to basically address all the things Spider-Man No Way Home gets wrong about the application process for MIT. This isn't meant to be like a criticism of the movie per se. I mean, I realize that, you know, for a movie, like there's other priorities, like they're wanting to make sure the storytelling is good and make sure the plot moves along. So there's a lot of reasons that they might have things that are inaccurate about the MIT application process. But I do get concerned, like when we see these depictions in pop culture of like what the college application process looks like, that it does affect like what people think will happen, you know, when they apply to college and when their kids will apply to college. And so in this video, I wanted to just kind of take that apart a little bit so we can talk about like what is accurate, what isn't accurate, and you know, how that might affect like what you think will happen if you apply to MIT. The first thing that stood out to me is kind of wildly, hilariously wrong was the timing. So early on in the movie, Peter and MJ are FaceTiming with each other, and I think it's like the day before the first day of school, and they're like, oh, you know, is your application for MIT turned in yet? And they're like, yeah, I just finished it up. And I mean, just like, what? It's like September? MIT's earliest application deadline is the November 1st early action deadline, and then the regular decision deadline is January 1st. And I can see why Peter and MJ would want to apply early action because they really want to go to MIT. And you know, I can even see why they might want to get the apps in early. Like that's great to get your apps in early. But to get them in like in September before school even starts is just kind of unheard of. You need your counselor to write you a recommendation. You need letters of recommendation from your teachers. And like none of those systems are even in place until school starts. Next, they hear back from colleges in like early November. So Peter gets his letter and he goes to meet MJ and Ned at the cafe where MJ works. And they're all like opening up their letters, and MJ's boss asks her why she hasn't taken down the Halloween decorations yet. So I'm assuming that's early November. The earliest anyone would hear back from MIT would be mid-December if you applied early action. So like it just was super weird to me to even see like Halloween decorations and then being like, oh look, we heard back from our colleges. The movie clearly gets just like the timeline of the admissions process just wildly wrong. So the timing in general is what I would say is the most like glaring error, and that's something that you really don't need to be an admissions expert to pick out. If you've applied to college recently, or you're looking at applying to colleges, or you know people who have applied to colleges, you'll look at that and you'll know that something just isn't right. The second thing that's just kind of like ridiculous to anyone who's been through the admissions process in the last like, I don't know, at least 10 years, is the fact that they actually are getting these actual letters in the mail. You know, colleges do send letters now, but pretty much everyone is going to look for their admissions decision in the online portal. They're not waiting for the actual letter to come in the mail. I'm old, so I did actually have to wait for a letter, but that's just not like where people are looking to, you know, hear back from the colleges now. That said, you know, I can really understand why the filmmakers would choose to have letters. Like it's just much more fun to have them getting a letter, like all sitting there opening the letters together, than it would be for them to be like all sitting at their laptops, like clicking to see if their portal has showed their decision yet. So, you know, I mean, artistic license, it looks better for the movie, I get it. So those two things are kind of no-brainers that the movie gets wrong, but they're kind of laughably inaccurate. Like, I don't think they're causing any harm. They're just kind of like, no, that's just not how college admissions works, but whatever. But the next few things I'm going to talk about are more subtle misconceptions people have about the college admissions process, and these are things that I do kind of worry that people will see a movie and sort of think that this might be how college admissions works, or something that they should be concerned about, or something they should do. And I think it actually could cause real harm if that's not corrected, like if people don't realize that these things aren't really accurate. The biggest issue I have is when Peter and MJ are FaceTiming about their applications, and MJ says, we'd have to get scholarships to actually go to MIT. Most extremely selective private colleges like MIT, so like MIT, Stanford, the Ivies, the colleges like that, actually have really amazing financial aid for low and middle income students who are admitted. MIT has especially amazing financial aid. I'm just going to quote directly from their website. We are one of only 5 colleges in the US that is need blind and full need for all our undergraduate students domestic and international. This means that MIT will not consider your financial situation as part of your application, and if you do get in, they will cover all demonstrated need. And that's need-based financial aid, not scholarships like MJ is talking about. Furthermore, MIT goes on to say that most students with family incomes below $90,000 a year do not pay tuition, period. And also, 82% of MIT undergrads graduated debt-free in 2021. There are some things that you could quibble over here. The cost of tuition isn't taking into account housing and books and some other things like that. But what really concerns me here is that I feel like the movie is perpetuating this idea that lower income students can't afford to go to colleges like MIT. And that was once true, but these colleges are making more and more effort to ensure that lower and middle income students can afford to go if they're, able to get in. And, we really want to encourage, people from lower income communities to be applying to colleges like MIT. I just hate to think that someone like MJ, who's this brilliant young woman of color, would look at MIT and think, oh, I would love to go there, but I can't afford it, when she could, so it makes me just want to go into the movie and talk to her and be like, oh my God, MJ, if you get into MIT, you can totally go. They are going to pay for it. And it can be an issue, for upper middle class, or yes, if her family's making a ton of money, she's not going to get that same financial aid. But I mean, those debt statistics are telling me people are not taking out tons of loans to go to MIT. And overall, they have amazing financial aid. And, I don't think MJ is supposed to have a lot of money. Peter, he talks about how he's the most famous person in the world, but he's still broke. I don't think Aunt May is making that much money, working in a homeless shelter or whatever she does exactly. So I'm pretty sure we're supposed to think of them as sort of low middle income students who would definitely benefit from MIT's financial aid. I also kind of think that Tony Stark would have set up a college fund for Peter. I mean, he's the one who initially suggested Peter should apply to MIT, I think in Homecoming. So I don't know. Let's talk about the list. If I were advising Peter and MJ and Ned, we would have a serious talk about their college lists, which apparently consists of MIT, which is the dream, and 3 backup schools in Boston. That is just not how a good college list works. And I do have a video on how to build your college list, and it will tell you why this is not a good idea. But basically, you should be applying to more colleges. You should be applying to target colleges. MIT, for anybody, I would consider a far-reach school, just because the percent of students admitted are so low that they turn away just tons of amazing applicants every year. They should also be applying probably to just more colleges. I know they all want to be together in Boston, I get it, but if they're serious candidates for MIT, they should also be looking at a bunch of other great schools like Stanford, where I went, or Caltech, or some of the Ivies, or some colleges that aren't quite so hard to get into. So, 4 schools total and just 1 dream and other backups is just not a healthy way to think about the colleges that you're applying to. Anyway, this clearly wasn't a good plan because Peter didn't get into any of his backup schools. So let's just say if I could have talked to them, they would have planned better. Unfortunately, Peter and MJ do not have me as their admissions counselor, so I can't help them figure out these things. And when they do run into problems, Peter goes to Dr. Strange. For the record, Dr. Strange is amazing and my favorite character in the MCU, but he absolutely sucks as an admissions counselor. So they all get denied by MIT because of the controversy surrounding Spider-Man, and Peter decides to go to Dr. Strange to ask for help. Kids, go to a college counselor or your high school counselor if you need help with the college admissions process, not a wizard, technically sorcerer. Peter and Dr. Strange come up with this convoluted scheme to make everyone forget that he's Spider-Man so that his friends can get into MIT, and that goes terribly wrong, which is obviously the main plot of the movie. But after they do this, Dr. Strange says well, you tried to convince them to reconsider, right? And Peter's what, I can just call? And Dr. Strange says, you didn't even think to plead your case with them first before you asked me to brainwash the entire world? I mean, he does sort of have a point, but also no. Look, I can totally buy Stephen Strange being the kind of asshole who would call up MIT and demand that they reconsider his application. And honestly, who knows? Maybe if somebody could get that to work, he could. But for 99.9% of the normal population, that is just a terrible idea. Please do not call up colleges when you don't get in and ask to know why or demand that they reconsider your application. That said, Peter does have an especially unique case, and there is a way to address this, which is that he could submit an appeal letter, which is a letter which you send to the college to like explain your situation and ask them to reconsider your admission. And I think like in his case, like yes, that might make sense, but not calling them up or chasing after a dean of admissions in a traffic jam. Should Peter Parker reach out to MIT? Yes, actually that seems like a reasonable thing to do. Should the average applicant, the average person who is watching this movie, think that this is a good thing to do if you don't get into a college? Absolutely not. So the last thing I want to talk about is, would these kids get into MIT? For MJ, I actually totally buy it. Peter says that she has the scores and the grades, which is actually kind of a problem because you need so much more than the scores and the grades to get into a college like MIT. But I'm going to go ahead and assume that MJ has straight A's, that she's maxed out the APs available to her at the Midtown School of Science and Technology, that she's taken a lot of advanced science and technology classes and has a 1600 on the SAT or near to it and a 36 on the ACT or near to that. But that's not enough to get into MIT. Like you really have to do something impressive outside of your scores and grades. So we know from Homecoming that she is on the national winning academic decathlon team. And after that, she was put in charge of the team. So that's a pretty big extracurricular. She also works at the Peter Pan Donut and Pastry Shop. And it's pretty impressive that she's holding down a job while also, keeping up such high grades and doing academic decathlon. She's also just like clearly super smart and like clearly reads a lot and has really interesting opinions on politics and all kinds of things. So, I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt and think like she probably has other extracurriculars that she does, and I think she's brilliant. So yeah, I think MJ can get into MIT. For Peter, it gets a little complicated. If he put down like being Spider-Man as his main extracurricular, like yes, that would be extremely impressive. But I'm not really clear on whether he's like applying as like Peter Parker as Spider-Man or if he's applying as Peter Parker. And we know from, I think Homecoming in particular, that like he was like skipping classes and he dropped out of some of his extracurriculars. He was kind of like not showing up to academic decathlon events. So I feel like his academic record outside of Spider-Man is like his academic record itself is a little spotty, and like his extracurriculars are kind of like haphazard. So I'm not really sure. It's kind of hard for me to guess what his application looks like. Like, did he write about being Spider-Man for his essays, or did he just kind of like leave that out of the app? For Ned, I mean, sure, like we know he has academic decathlon. That's not really enough, but we just don't get like so much information about everything that he does. So like maybe he has like a bunch of other extracurriculars. Honestly, I can't really evaluate it. So overall takeaways here, I mean, it's fun that they make college admissions like such a big part of the movie, because I mean, I do think for students who are applying to colleges like MIT, it becomes a really huge part of your life. And I think a lot of what they get about like the stress and pressure and just how important it feels in your life at the time is really accurate. And I think that's part of why like we have so much sympathy for Peter Parker when, he doesn't get in, and not only that, he's like hurt his friends' chances. And it really creates a lot of just investment in the character, and that's part of like why we like him so much. And by the end of the movie, we find out that MJ and Ned both got in and are going to go to MIT. So presumably MJ got this sort of financial aid scholarship thing figured out. And I think she's a really great role model, and she does get to go. So I'm really happy with that. And even if there were kind of like things during the movie that like I don't feel like were quite right. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions about the MIT application process, please feel free to put them in the comments. And please also like and subscribe for future videos on the college admissions process.